just wanted to welcome everybody um, to our next episode of ABODE Academy. And tonight promises to be a wonderful, interesting evening. I've been waiting for this one. We're going to talk to some great folks, the Moroneys, about Buddhism tonight. But just welcome. And, most of you, again, have heard my introduction. I'm Beverly Tumala. I am a nurse with Christus Hospice. I'm also the vice chair of the board here at ABODE and the chairman of the education committee. And we are just so excited that we've had such a wonderful turnout every night of our ABODE Academy 4. And again, I just appreciate and thank you guys so much for tuning in again tonight. All of our previous episodes are online and they're on the website. So if you go to the abodeacademy.org or abodehome.org, you will see the ABODE Academy listed, and just click on it and you'll be able to get access to all of our presentations. So please, if you missed one, go ahead and tune in and you'll catch up. Before we get started, as you all know, we have a custom of starting with a contemplative moment, and Mary's been gracious enough to lead us in those the past few weeks. And so, Mary, I will let you go ahead and get us started.
Okay, this one comes from the Moroneys. It's written by Shantideva, and he was an 8th century Indian philosopher and Buddhist monk. May I become at all times, both now and forever, a protector for those without protection, a guide for those who have lost their way, a ship for those with oceans to cross, a bridge for those with rivers to cross, a sanctuary for those in danger, a lamp for those without light, a place of refuge for those who lack shelter, and a servant to all in need. It's really beautiful.
Take that all in for a moment, to be a servant to all of those in need. That's kind of why many of us are here, and that's what we do. And thank you for that. That's lovely. So tonight we are just so blessed to welcome the Moroneys. We have Covita and Christopher here with us, and they are longtime members and board members of the Tibetan Buddhism Center for World Peace. Studying and practicing Mahayana Buddhism in the Tibetan tradition, both of them are artists and musicians too. So welcome, Moroneys. You have the floor, so we'll mute and start listening.
It's nice to be here with you all.
Sure is.
Just very quickly, I'd like to make sure that you understand a little bit about the Tibetan Buddhism Center for World Peace, which is more of an idea than a thing. About 5 years ago, when we took on caring for Christopher's mom, we decided to ask our monks about getting more formally organized than we had been for the previous 12 years. And so we decided to form the 501c3, and the monks gave it the name. Our 2 Tibetan monk teachers at the time, they're still our teachers. One has passed away, but in any case, we currently we had quite a bit of momentum until COVID hit, as did for everybody, but we're now in the mode like we have been for most of the years since we formed as a Buddhism group, which is informal. We meet at our home. We don't have a temple. We don't have a resident monk. We have students and we have the Buddhist Dharma, and we invite visiting monks. And we do have a teacher in India who most of us are connected to pretty strongly, and he will be coming in November. But to make a long story short, we don't have a place. It's intention to practice and study and to put it into our lives on an ongoing basis. So
we've Zoomed like this,
yeah,
every
our
week.
weekly sessions, we do
People can come in person. We're doing this at what was my mother's 5-acre estate and in her home. And people come in person or we Zoom.
and we're all volunteer, which in some ways unfortunately, we're not a very good resource in terms of, we don't have an ordained monk. And while I'm thinking about it, maybe Mary could put that document in the chat again, but we made a PDF, and there are a couple of monks that we know of. One we know quite well. And I'm sure that I know personally that I've gotten calls from, I think one was from ABODE and one was from another center, looking for a monk that could come and say prayers with a person that was another hospice service. Anyway, we do what we can, but we're working full time, and I just want you to know that at the present moment, we're more of a vision than a bricks and mortar reality. But we do study. We do have
we
weekly
definitely have a
sessions.
study
Yeah.
group. Yeah.
And I mean, anyway, okay. So the document that Christopher and I put together for you is a very brief outline of some of the key points that we felt would be helpful for people attending to companioning the guests of ABODE, and just in general, people who are making the transition from this life to the next life. Of course, Buddhists believe and practice according to the idea that there's reincarnation, that you have potentially countless lifetimes as you traverse your existence in the universe. And so the document we put together, we felt was just a very narrow in scope, in the sense that it was presented with the intention of being more practically helpful if you're attending to a person who is Buddhist and who you'd like to have some basic ground under you if they don't have a community that's gathering around them.
Yeah.
So customs, I'm sure most of you know that just like Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, and every other religion, Buddhism has jillions and jillions of sects, many, many lineages, as Buddhism spread throughout the world from India, where Shakyamuni Buddha, who's the founder, as it spread around the world, Buddhism, like every other religion, took on the customs of the country or countries to which it spread. And so the variations are myriad, and it is highly, in the same way that you had a session, say example last week, just the Orthodox versus the mainstream sort of Catholic. Buddhism, you could have separate sessions on quite a few different variations of Buddhist practice. We study Mahayana Buddhism, and the main distinction that would be helpful for you to be aware of with a guest or a person who's making the transition would be if over the course of their lifetime they identify themselves as a Mahayana Buddhist as opposed to a Theravada Buddhist. And the main distinction between these two, now it happens that in the West, especially in the United States, but in the West in general, primarily you'll run into Mahayana Buddhists. But the general big overarching difference between the two is that a Theravada Buddhist practitioner, their ultimate goal is to achieve the state of Arhat, which is a being that has extinguished the karmic cycle of death, birth, and rebirth, or birth, death, and rebirth, by engaging in highly virtuous practice, by perfecting meditative concentration, and by having a direct realization of the nature of reality. And so for a Theravada Buddhist, these would be, and in the document I list the countries, but it would be like Thailand. Let me see if I, well, yeah, Burma, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Laos. I used to work actually with a Cambodian Buddhist who confirmed to me, a Mahayana practitioner, that yes, indeed, the goal of a Theravada Buddhist practitioner, and he himself was to extinguish this cycle of birth, death, rebirth, and so on. So the Mahayana practitioner, which is primarily the Americans who were not born Buddhists, for the most part, they are Mahayana. This is the lineage or the body of teachings. There's a lot of background material about what makes Mahayana Buddhism versus Theravada, but it's not necessary for you to know. It's interesting, and you can do years of study on it. So the Mahayana Buddhists, the prayer that Mary read that we had sent from Shantideva captures the Mahayana motivation for their existence. So a person who is a Mahayana practitioner has the overall aspiration of becoming a Buddha, not to extinguish their own cycle of suffering, but to achieve the highest states of that an enlightened being can achieve in order to be a skillful helper for others, to lead others similarly to the enlightened state. So that's why in that prayer, may I be a boat, a bridge, protection, and so forth. This, and the other thing for the Mahayana, I mean, this is what you're doing. This is what your life is. This is not like a thing you add to your life. Like I'm an architect and, you know, I practice Buddhism. It's when you really adopt, and as it begins to absorb into your core, a Mahayana practitioner, this is everything they do, everything that arises in their life, problems, good things, blah, 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 sickness and death, all is incorporated into this goal.
As Mahayanas, we're working on our minds and our emotions to try to get to the point where we have, and it sounds like a very lofty goal, and it is, but according to Buddhism, it is possible that we're able to remove all of our afflictive emotions, all of the anger, the attachment, the jealousy, the neuroses that we have, and sort of by beginning to understand what the nature of reality is, and developing our minds and opening up to realize that all beings, not just people even, just all beings have the same kind of problem, that they don't want to suffer and they want to be happy. And so how do we go about what is the cause of suffering? What is the cause of happiness? And how do we go about not only helping ourselves achieve that, but then helping others to do the same? And Mahayana Buddhism is popular in the West largely because when China invaded Tibet in the late 50s and forced the exile of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, that culture and that history that they had just spread around the world, and particularly was very popular in the West in the 60s and 70s, and grew and grew and grew. So that's why Mahayana is very popular.
Okay, I'm gonna address some of the questions in the chat, but I want to first step back just a bit and say, well, what makes a person a Buddhist? And this is very core because it will help you as you're companioning somebody. Basically, what a Buddhist is a person who has complete confidence in the life, the example, the teachings, and the practice that Buddha laid out. And the way we describe this is that we take refuge in the Buddha, we take refuge in the Dharma, we take refuge in the Sangha. And in the document, I give you this, but this core thing of taking refuge, in a sense, what you're saying, by being a Buddhist over countless lifetimes, I am going to follow the teachings of Buddha and his example. The Dharma, the Dharma is the teachings and anything that leads to your enlightenment. And the Sangha are the companions. And there's many explanations of what Sangha is, everything from just your community to the enlightened beings who are almost like your guardian angels that are helping you and whispering ideas in your mind and inspiring you. So yeah.
Teachers.
Hey guys, let's do the questions at the end.
Okay, alrighty.
Continue with your program, and we'll do questions at the very
Okay.
Okay.
So so in the document, I just mentioned the countries that you're most likely to find Theravada versus Mahayana. And just mentioned that because for a Theravada practitioner, it would be probably very reassuring to have them reflect on all the efforts they made during their life to be a good, virtuous person, and so forth. For a Mahayana practitioner, same thing. You might well, and in both cases, this also is a commonality. Overall, for any Buddhist that is going through the process of dying, the core thing that is preserved and sought after is a calm, peaceful, uplifting, no grieving, no gnashing of teeth, the calmest possible mind, because Buddhism posits reincarnation. The calmer your mind is and the more stable your mind is at the time of death, the better your rebirth will be. Because the analogy is used, you have lived according to Buddhist thought, Buddhist teaching, countless lifetimes, and have many, many kinds of karmic seeds planted in the field of your being. You've got numerous positive, virtuous deeds, numerous harming deeds.
They're kind of like imprints on your consciousness.
And at the time of death, it is said that if you keep a virtuous mind, have very auspicious and virtuous aspirations for your next rebirth, that the negative seeds or the harming seeds will not ripen to the extent that the virtuous seeds. So in effect, Buddhism also posits that all karmic seeds can be dormant for many, many lifetimes, and in all karmic seeds also can expire. They have a shelf life like seeds. And it's especially good to keep in mind that it is taught, especially in our lineage. I don't know about Theravada, but in our Mahayana, especially our Tibetan Buddhist monks, talk a lot about purification. And so saying that, I go for that purification will actually depotentiate the possibility of that negative karmic seed to germinate and ripen and become suffering issues for you in future lifetimes. Now, that there's a lot of nuance that goes into all of this, but at the time of death and for the limited amount of ability one has, the main thing is you want to always emphasize the good deeds, the efforts made, like that, like you do with anybody. Really.
I was going to say, I'm sure you do.
I mean, I'm sure
as a matter of course.
This is the common thing,
Yeah.
you know.
It's just logical.
In this case, you know, what you're doing is you're intentionally saying, okay, this is not about getting to heaven. This is, in some ways, it's almost more important, because I say this as someone born and raised a Catholic. At the time of death for a Catholic, what you've done is you've done. If you've committed mortal sins, oh well. And so there's there's, it's sort of baked in the cake. Where it is here with Buddhism, the whole tone of the and setting at the time of death, actually, they call it karma. It's a different type of karma that actually sets the stage for the next rebirth, the type of rebirth. And for both Mahayana Theravada practitioners, that you want to be reborn in a situation where you can continue to study and practice and continue your path to enlightenment. So, so that refuge prayer is a common denominator and would always be appropriate, to for many, many Buddhists that are born and raised Buddhists. This is not so much the case with converts, but their faith in Buddha is much like, is kind of, I don't want to say a blind faith, but it is somewhat like a blind faith.
Yeah.
They haven't studied the Dharma and they don't know all the explanations of how karma works and this and that and the other thing, but they have faith in Buddha.
So that refuge prayer would be a good one to say for them or with them. Also, what would be very, very helpful,
I
and
have some more coming up.
it would be a Buddha statue.
Oh yeah,
An
so
image
that's
of a
the
Buddha,
next
an
section.
image of a Buddha or a Buddha statue.
This is the next section, is this. So in your document, you'll see a section on the setting, and it does address what would be helpful for all Buddhists. And as Christopher said, I mean, if you can acquire an image of the Buddha or a Buddha statue, that place that somewhere within view of the person. If possible, to set up a little, quote, altar, maybe if possible to have a candle, and if
candle.
possible to have incense.
Doesn't have to be elaborate, though.
Just something to that might make it feel auspicious and help that person's mind stay in a happy, elevated state of mind to carry them to the next fortunate rebirth.
How about a mala? If there's something like, it's like rosary
I
beads.
mentioned that in the document.
It's like rosary beads, but without the,
Let me
it's just the beads.
There's an important thing here to say that is very different, and not all Buddhists have the same view of what happens immediately after death. So I'm going to primarily talk about the Western, and this is the Mahayana view. And I'll say we ourselves, and for all Mahayana practitioners, especially the Tibetan tradition that we're familiar with, especially the Tibetan tradition, so keep in mind the Dalai Lama is, I'd say he's the most famous Buddhist alive today. He is the tradition that we follow. He himself does the practice of, which I'm about to describe, which we do and many do. You essentially rehearse the time of your death. You rehearse the inner signs to your consciousness and the outer signs for the people attending to you of the process of dying. And it is said that your body, your physical body dissolves in stages with the elements, fire, water, air, and so forth. And there are certain inner signs and certain exteriors. I don't go into that in this document, but feel free to contact me if you want more on that. The idea being for the practitioner is that the more familiar you are with the death process, the more calm you can stay. And there's even the possibility at the very end of it, you enter this very subtle state of consciousness called the mind of clear light. And it's the goal of every practitioner to then meditate on the reality of things in that very subtle state, which they say then carries you to liberation and enlightenment. So there's also this thing that can happen, and I'm sure most of you have heard of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is a text that is read. This was written primarily, it's the transference of consciousness. This text is all about assisting the dying person to transfer their consciousness from that body and that lifetime to the next rebirth through a realm called the Bardo. And when all people die, according to the Tibetan tradition, you enter what's called the intermediate state
Or the Bardo.
or the Bardo. This is where it's basically a dreamlike state in that if it comes to your mind, you see it. If you think Cincinnati, suddenly you see Cincinnati. If you think holy Buddha statues in this state, they will manifest in front of you. And in the Tibetan Buddha of the Dead, they're cautioning you to not get distracted and so forth, because you want only to have virtuous, happy thoughts, because you don't want to, it's a little bit like a kid drawing a picture of a monster and then seeing the monster and getting afraid. So there's this element. How can I say this? So the Bardo is, you take on a human form, like the life you're going to have. I'll just keep it to that. And they say that you stay in the Bardo state, this is the Tibetan belief, for up to 49 weeks. Every 7 days, there's a possibility that your karma
49 days.
Right, every 7 days, you will have the possibility of taking a new life, of finding a new mother and going into that mother's womb and starting your new next life.
So that's 7 weeks, not
But
49 weeks.
No,
You
I'm
said
saying
49.
7 days.
You said 49 weeks initially.
Sorry, it's 49 days. So every 7 days, there's this possibility you could take a rebirth, but maximum is that you do that 7 times, and anyway, that's the Tibetan view of it. So you can see there's a lot of possibility for a practitioner who's been studying and practicing this way. It's sort of like, oh, I'm going on a journey, and how am I going to do?
We had a close friend, a Buddhist friend, who we knew for many years and were studying with her, and she passed away probably 5 years ago, but she was very, very prepared. And so
she had done this meditation practice
every day since the 60s. So we were with her in her room. She was dying, and she was telling us what she was seeing, and she was starting to see the various internal signs, and it made her very excited that she was actually seeing the signs that they told you would see. And she died an incredibly peaceful, beautiful. It was a beautiful passing. It was nothing like I've ever seen.
She died with a smile on her face.
With a smile.
She had it was sort of the fruit of all this practice.
Yeah.
She was smiling.
So that's what we aim. That's what we aim for. That's what we all want.
So our role as we're accompanying a person who's in their last stages, while they're still conscious, but even if they are unconscious, is to direct their minds away from disturbing emotions.
Sometimes they
and
will
towards happy emotions.
Sometimes there may be certain prayers that they would really like it if you would say for them.
I'll go into that in this next section.
Yeah, so that would be
why
helpful.
don't you want to cover that? You know how the Vietnamese, that's their favorite.
Oh,
This is
Amitabha Buddha. Yeah.
And then this is Four Measurables, and then Heart Sutra.
So if you're a Vietnamese Buddhist, they believe strongly in a Buddha called Amitabha Buddha. There are many different kinds. There are many kinds of Buddhas, and these Buddhas help in different ways. And in Amitabha, with Amitabha Buddha, the idea is that you are going to be reborn in a pure land where you can continue your practices and studies. And so they pray to be born into a pure land. And the prayer that they say is Namo Amitabha Buddha, Namo Amitabha Buddha. And so you would repeat that over and over. If the person is in the last phases of death, as you probably are all quite familiar with, you would just sort of quietly be saying this to them in their ear or very close to them so that they could hear that as they are just passing. And that would help them direct their mind towards that particular outcome that they were hoping for. If you're a Tibetan Buddhists, and in the Mahayana tradition, which is Tibetan Buddhism, the idea is that you want to go all the way to enlightenment, all the way to becoming a Buddha. According to the Buddha, any sentient being over time can become enlightened, can become a Buddha. And the whole purpose of the Buddha is to help others liberate themselves from suffering and from ignorance. And so the idea is that you would continue to practice and continue on your path towards Buddhism so that you could then finally, ultimately, help them in the best way possible. If you're completely enlightened, you would know exactly how to help a particular person or an animal or any being overcome their suffering. You'd know what to say, you'd know what to do that would help and put them in the right direction. So for a Mahayana Tibetan Buddhists, you would basically do the, you probably have all very familiar with this mantra. It's Om Mane Padme Hum, Om Mane Padme Hum.
That's in your doc.
Yeah. And that's sort of like the jewel. They're talking about the jewel in the lotus. So the idea is that within all of us, we have this jewel. We have this jewel. We have this ability, this capability of becoming fully enlightened for the benefit of all other beings. And that's what we're trying to develop, trying to uncover, trying to, develop and uncover.
Vietnamese Buddhists are also generally Mahayana Buddhists. Their style and rituals are very different, but they love the Dalai Lama. All the American Vietnamese people who
love Tibetan Buddhists,
racially and culturally Vietnamese, love both Amitabha Buddha and the Om Mani Padme Hum.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And in general, have in the document what's called the four measurables. May all beings have happiness and its causes. The idea here is you are thinking these four things that are here. One could also recite, may all beings have happiness and its causes. May all beings be free from suffering and its causes. May all beings never be separated from the happiness that knows no suffering. And may all beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred or anger or animosity towards enemies. These are called the four
immeasurable thoughts.
The idea is by thinking these thoughts, you're trying to, as sincerely as possible, wish this for others. You're not thinking about yourself at all. As you're passing away, may all beings have happiness. May all, you're thinking, you're putting yourself in the most elevated, auspicious, positive, virtuous state of mind possible.
It's the reason this is so logical and makes so much sense is that I'm sure all of you are aware that we live in a very interdependent world, an interdependent system. Everything is interconnected and interdependent. It doesn't necessarily appear to us that way. But if you go down even to the level of quantum physics, it's definitely that way. Everything is connected. So the whole point of may all beings have happiness in its causes, may all beings be free from suffering in its causes, is that this is a completely interdependent system. I will never really truly be happy unless all beings are happy.
Well, but the point here, the point here at the time of death, is that it puts you in a very virtuous state of mind. That
would be so beneficial to say for a Mahayana Buddhist, just to repeat those four measurables to them as they are passing. That would be so beneficial.
And then
have a lot of meaning.
Then the other thing that I reference here is what's called, you'll often hear it called the Heart Sutra. Technically, it's the Heart of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. This is the Buddha's teaching on how things exist. And I give you a link to an English translation to it in that document. The person Christopher was referring to earlier requested that we would, several times a day as we were attending her, to recite this mantra, because it lays out Buddha's teaching on how things exist, your impermanence, and how everything is very dreamlike. And seems real. It's not an illusion, but it seems illusory. And that when you pull it apart, you pull these interdependent things apart, it's as if you can't find, they use the they use the metaphor a lot when they're teaching this concept of a chariot. You know, you call it a chariot, but
or a car. You say car.
When you take the wheels off and the the various parts off, there's no chariot to be found among the parts. And so this perfection of Wisdom Sutra is often the heart of it. This short excerpt, I don't know.
It's called the Heart Sutra.
It's called the Heart Sutra, and I said again, I've given you a link. It is, the intention here is to release your fear and your grasping onto this life, and also to release your grasping onto your next rebirth. You're trying to dissolve or defuse any kind of resistance to letting go and going with the process of life and death, and in the case of Buddhism, rebirth. So that was provided to you because it's helpful. And then I sort of complemented that with a little brief thing on the core essence of the Buddhist view on how things exist, because as you're conversing with a Buddhist, these would be, yeah.
It depends on the Buddhist.
Yeah, it just really depends on the person, really, and their condition there, and so forth.
Yeah.
And yeah.
For instance, like Covita and I, the teachers that we've had, they taught us to every day to practice the death process that we're going to go through, to become familiar with it, to think about death every day, to think about the way we're living our life towards that, not just towards that, but for the present moment, but also for the future going all forward, many lifetimes to come.
I think this is common. I kind of remember this. I went to Catholic school, and I think this sort of idea applied as well, which is that every day could be your last day, and to not waste it. Do not waste it, and don't delay doing the good, virtuous things you intend doing. Just do them, because you may never have the chance tomorrow.
Speaking of which, all of you who are involved in hospice, my God, what a wonderful thing you're doing. Talk about doing something virtuous with your lives now. You're not wasting any. It's such a wonderful thing to be doing. I can't commend you enough, really.
As we experienced with our friend Carolyn, but say, for example, when Chris's mom was passing away, she died in February.
Yeah.
And though she liked the Tibetan monks, she was gung-ho about Buddhism and the Dalai Lama. We heard about the Dalai Lama first from her back in the
I grew up knowing about the Dalai Lama.
1970s, but she herself
was not a Buddhist, though.
She was not a Buddhist, but she liked having the trappings of the Buddhist thing around her in the house. She also was born and raised a Catholic, and I forgot what my point was going to be.
Something about her process?
No, I think just it was sort of a general statement that I'm sure, that we've seen. I also accompanied my brother, who was pretty much an agnostic. And, having a calm room in his case meant having Hawaiian music. So,
and root beer.
Well, there you go. Yeah. I see so many questions.
Are you ready for questions?
I think it would be a good idea to just go ahead and go to the questions.
All right. So some of these you've answered, but we'll start with the number one. It says, so Buddhists believe in reincarnation. Many times, so you did answer that.
Yes.
And are there lessons to be learned? Like
always.
Some people think, if you don't learn it, you come back, and
what
you reach such enlightenment, you're done.
According to the Buddha, there is no beginning whatsoever to consciousness. So we think in terms of beginningless time. We have been a consciousness with some kind of form since beginningless time. It's not always human. And so also there is no end. So there is actually, when you're enlightened, when you become a Buddha, that's not the end at all. Because what you want to do then is to help every other conscious being. And what I asked our teacher once, I said, well, all right, so there are all these conscious beings since beginningless time. Well, is there a finite number of them? And he said, oh, no, it's infinite. So, so not only is it beginningless and endless, but the consciousnesses are infinite in the Buddhist view. So there is no, once you would reach enlightenment, there'd be no stopping, no end to it. No, you would always be helping. Then there'd be others who would then reach enlightenment, and it would be like that. That's kind of the view.
From the part of the question, are there lessons to be learned from the Mahayana point of view? You'd say they often talk about the wisdom wing and the compassion wing. So you could summarize the lessons to be learned. It's not like, gosh, in my last life I did this, and so in my next life I got to learn that. You could interpret it that way, but there's not like some dean of the Bardo who's giving you your class assignments for next life. Yeah. But you're always wanting to achieve the ultimate understanding of the nature of reality and the maximum possible level of care and compassion for all sentient beings. And so that would be the lesson, that would be the overarching, if you will.
According to the Buddha, there's one cause for all the problems, and there is one solution.
All right.
And so in terms of lessons, it's not like, basically, if you get the cause of suffering down, you have learned your lesson.
So do Buddhists fear death? Is it welcome? So it sounds like it's not really feared.
Well, again, it's highly dependent on the
person.
person and their experience and their practice. We haven't known any Buddhists who feared death. However, I am sure that there are many Buddhists who fear death because they maybe have developed regret, or in much the same way anybody, maybe my next rebirth is not going to be so great because all these terrible things I did. Nobody welcomes, many times, in most cases, often, whatever word, death is the process of dying is accompanied by pain and some kind of suffering. You have to let go and give up and give away your loved ones, your possessions, your name and fame, if you've achieved any. There's a lot of letting go. That's why that Heart Sutra can be helpful. So if I were to answer the question directly, I have a healthy respect for death, and I fear it in the sense that I'm aware that it's important to keep a stable, clear mind, to rely on the teaching and the understanding that I have, and to not, especially if So
from my point of view, I want to live as long as possible so that I can continue to keep working on these two, what they call the two wings of Buddhism, the compassion wing, or they call method, and the wisdom. So to be able to continue to work on that, I would want to live as long as possible. It's not like I'm looking forward to death or waiting for death, or I know death is inevitable, but I don't want to waste the time I have here now, and I would love to be able to live as long as possible to continue working.
So, and as we mentioned, for certain practices, those monks will ask their students, older monks, and we know this firsthand from our teacher, did this when he passed away, sit me up in bed when I'm near death so that I can meditate, so that I can achieve this
that
mind
depends.
of clear light.
That depends on the practitioner.
So in his case, it was like, because there's, again, so it's a like every other aspect of most religions, there's a lot of answers to that question.
It's possible you could get someone at that level, at ABODE.
Let's keep
you never
going
know.
on. let's keep going.
So I think you just answered this. How have your personal beliefs and views about dying and death changed as you've embraced Buddhism? You know,
Yeah, I think kind of answered that. I mean,
Yeah.
there is, yeah.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
going to tell a funny story because in first grade, I remember I was studying the Baltimore Catechism like all good Catholic girls in first grade. And
You were a better Catholic than me.
the sister told us, be careful of what you do because you never know when you're going to die, when God's going to take you. And that put a lot of anxiety in me. So that instilled some kind of fear. So it has changed.
However, there is,
Mine has changed.
Buddhism says the time of death is certain, but the time of death is uncertain. We don't know. So it's a similar thing.
Well,
don't
the
know.
question is about, has your attitude changed since you've embraced Buddhism? Your
Yeah.
personal attitude.
Personal attitude, yes, definitely.
Anyway.
I take a
mean,
lot more responsibility.
if I were gonna, on a very personal level, I would say the thing that's been most amazing to me is how much of the fear about life and death, but life itself, the fear is overall very different. This is not even close.
talk about grieving. What does grieving look like in Buddhism?
Well, we definitely grieve the Dalai Lama. He cries even when he's giving talks. He will cry about what happened in Tibet with the Chinese and the Tibetan people, and then he'll just let it go and he'll joke about it. And he'll go back to joking. He also holds he harbors no.
I think they're talking grieving at the time of death.
Grieving at the time of death.
The topic is death. So
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. What you want to do is not have a lot of people grieving and crying around the person who's dying, because that is going to make them feel really drawn to the people around them, their life, and they're going to be regretting things and not being it's not as easy for someone to let go when you have a lot of people, your children or whatever, around you crying and going, don't leave me, please don't go, I'm so sad. This does not help the state of mind. And in Buddhism, what you want is a very calm mind. Now, a highly developed practitioner could probably deal with that quite easily.
They say, I've heard this, I don't know it firsthand, although I experienced it once, that in Japan, when a person is born, they cry, and when they die, they laugh. So,
for instance, with my mother, when she was dying, anytime I would start to feel grief when I was with her, or sadness, or
we're talking about grief.
Yeah, sadness.
Grieving,
when I was with her, the way I would stop it in myself was I would then turn my attention all towards her and think about, what does she want? What does she need right now? How can I help her right now? Rather than feeling because grief, I hate to say, it's always about us. It's always about us. And so if we can get out of our own sadness and focus on how can we help the person right in front of us who is dying here? How do we help them? And I found with me, because a relationship a child has with their mother is very, very close and very complex. And so if I was able to just think, what do I do to help her? How can I help her now? I was able to that was all could just go away, and I didn't have to worry about that.
Let's keep going with the questions. There's some good ones here.
All right. What drew you both to Buddhist faith? You were both Catholic.
I can't speak for Christopher, but I went to parochial school, and I never believed, even though I was told to memorize the Baltimore Catechism, I never believed it. I don't know why, honestly, as a 6-7-year-old. And like in the back of my mind, especially as I became an adult, I would hear little things about Buddhism. Christopher and I went down we checked out all the 3 branches of monotheism at a pretty deep level. And then, finally one day we said, okay, fine, let's just do the Buddhism. And the first time I went to go sit in a Buddhist temple, I just cried because, and the words, I'm finally home. After, and I was
For me,
50 years old.
For me,
so-
some of my earliest memories as a child was I was staring at the clouds in the sky, wondering I didn't have what was life all about? What is this all about? I don't understand this. And I also grew up a Catholic, but as I mentioned, my mother was a very, wow, she just was into everything. So we had a Buddha statue at our house. I knew about the Dalai Lama in the early 60s. I explored many, many, many different kinds of things. And over the years, especially, and Covita and I got together very early on. We were 14 years old when we met. And we had a very strong bond with that. And so we, and the bond was, we were both searching for something that wasn't with what we found in our families, in terms of the religion we were born into. And so we kept searching over the years. And finally, like she said, I think when we were around 50, that's when we became Buddhists.
All right, moving on.
Okay. Tom says, I've read about two concepts associated with Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths and the Eight.
You have 9 minutes.
What are they and how?
Yeah, so the Four Noble Truths is the first teaching that Buddha gave: the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and
the path to the cessation.
The path to the cessation of suffering. That's the Eightfold Path. In some ways, this is what attracts Westerners to Buddhism, is because Buddhism starts out its first teaching as, yep, there's suffering.
See, there's suffering, there's a cause, there's an end of suffering, and there's a cause to the end of suffering.
So it's sort of a logical sequence.
Yeah.
I think the Eightfold Path are the things like right speech, right livelihood, right action.
The things you would do that would aid you on that path of method and wisdom.
What about like suffering? Does suffering have a meaning at end of life? Are medications okay?
Yes, medications are fine.
Medications are okay for an advanced practitioner, and let's say they were trying to do a meditation at the end of their life. You wouldn't want to give them too much morphine so that they could try to maintain. But very simplistically put, karma is an action. And so everything that arises in your life is an experience or an action. When you're suffering, it is said you're extinguishing the previous action from probably another lifetime that created that suffering. And so you're happy that you're suffering. And so, I'll just leave it there. So that's there's still some really great questions I don't think we want to dive into, but you could say, it's almost like what a Catholic would say, you're extinguishing the karma, the negative karma, so the suffering has a purpose. You don't need to do it. It's great to give someone pain medication. There's no issue with that. So I think that's
especially at time of death.
I don't think we need to say any more.
Yes.
There's
rebirth. Okay, rebirth happens in burial or cremation, or does it matter?
It doesn't
matter.
Okay.
Doesn't matter.
For like our friend Carolyn, it is said that the rebirth, if you cannot disturb the body for a few days until because the belief is that the consciousness doesn't leave the body with the last breath, that the consciousness is still there and there's still some unwinding of the lifetime still happening. So the idea is to wait about 3 days if you can. In our world, we can't do that, but to not disturb the body for that period of time.
They do that in the monasteries. They do, and they used to do that in Tibet. They would let particularly an advanced meditator, they would keep them, they would just, before they did any kind of burial, they would just sit them up in the bed before they died, and then they would be in a meditative state. And some of these meditators can be in a meditative state for a long time, up to a month, and they still haven't decayed.
Yeah.
So
they actually say that they stay, they don't smell, they still have warmth and their cheeks are still rosy. Our teacher that passed away stayed in that state for a week.
Yeah.
Um,
Carolyn, our friend, stayed in that state for about 3 days.
3 days. I want to go back and just say, we don't mean to give short shrift to the main point of Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths.
Yeah.
The Four Noble Truths is the basic gestalt of why there is a thing called Buddhism. And the Eightfold Path is, the framework for which you traverse, but it's out. It didn't go into it because it felt a little bit outside the scope of, attending to a dying person, death and dying, though,
probably in most cases, it wouldn't even be possible to keep a body for 3 days after the person had passed. So it's not something to even concern yourselves with.
Although we did find out from Carolyn that whoever the coroner or whoever, there were some specific things that they could do to keep her body at home for 3 days, which involved keeping her on dry ice, basically.
And that would also, again, be in the case of somebody who had been meditating for years and years and years.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Is there a Buddhist prayer book you would recommend for chaplains?
I will. It would be dependent on the tradition, but I will find one and email it to y'all.
Yeah.
We have several here on our bookshelves are over here.
Yeah.
And there's all manner of books on dying and implements and things. But we've never really thought about it.
But you'd want something.
For something
you'd want
that's
something
universal.
really small.
Yeah.
I mean,
Small.
yeah.
So we'll what I gave you in the document would be safe to use with every Buddhist. There's 2 or 3 mantras and some guidance in that document to get you to, that sort of an emergency, sort of the quick start guide.
Is there a funeral home that knows about Buddhist beliefs and can follow rituals and?
Not that I
Really,
know
there's
of.
not. I put a link in the document to the Neptune Society because they have some information on their website that indicates that they are geared towards servicing the Buddhist community. We have never, and I'm just going to say this in general, if the person who's dying is coming from a community, there's the bigger temples here in San Antonio are Vietnamese, the Vietnamese temples.
Yeah.
And so they have
Same in
monks
Houston.
and they use whatever funeral home, but
Is there typically a funeral and a service or?
Well, because I don't know, in like the Vietnamese tradition, I'm going to say yes, because I think all human beings like to in some ways commemorate, but I think
There are very ornate ones
I
in the
only know what we've
monasteries.
done,
Yeah.
the monasteries, which it's
Yeah.
kind of weird. Most of what we know is this narrow thing taught by monks in a very traditional way. And they say prayers for 49 days to make sure that rebirth is good.
Mhm.
So overall, what you could say in terms of a service and for the loved ones and the friends, is that you would want to commit to remembering that person in a way that would aid their better, an auspicious
Absolutely, yeah.
rebirth for 49 days. That would be sort of a template. Everything that goes under that, and so like in the Vietnamese temple that we used to have our meetings in, they would put a picture of the person who passed away and leave it there for 49 days and put flowers in front of it.
And you would dedicate prayers to them, as you were saying the prayers.
But in the Tibetan tradition, they cremate the person and it's all around prayers. And then they have a tradition where they will say like that Heart Sutra that I included for 49 days. I can't say that we've been to a Buddhist funeral
No.
as such. We've been to a memorial service where prayers were recited and the things that I just described.
Sometimes
And-
just in people's homes.
Big disclaimer, what we don't know fills volumes.
Absolutely.
Well, it's 7:30 and our time is up.
Wow, that was quick.
Wasn't that fast?
Yeah.
I really appreciate you guys sharing with us tonight. And there were more questions, and maybe we can answer some of those, and we can get a document out to folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Chat's still up, but Covita and Christopher, thank you so much.
Oh, you're so
Our
welcome. Thank you.
pleasure.
Really. Hope it's been helpful in some way.
Now, Mary has put
funny.
the up in the chat. She's put the PDF for the document that Covita kept mentioning. So hopefully you guys can all download it and print it and look it over. It's got I have a copy of it in front of me, and it's got those prayers on it and such. So I'll need to make a copy and put those where I can use them. So when I do have, a patient that's Buddhist and is dying, I can help them. All right.
Yeah.
So tomorrow, everyone, you'll get a survey in your inbox. Don't forget to fill that out and let us know your thoughts about tonight. And as we're starting to get to the end of our sessions here, we've just got a few more to go. Kind of think of what you'd like to hear in the future about academies. What are some topics that you're interested in and would like to hear about? That would be really helpful for us. And I think that's it.
In fact, next week we have two speakers, and one is Pastor Stendhal, and he's on the call tonight. Pastor, you want to unmute and say hello to everybody? Howard Stendhal. Let me see. I'm going to
Unmute him.
He's looking for the unmute. There he is.
There. My gratitude to the presenters tonight. It was very interesting to me and very valuable. Thank you for taking time to share very profound things, very valuable things. We'll do our best next week, Pastor Douglas and I, to bring a very broad Protestant perspective to this, and military. I have military experience most of my adult life. I'll be honored to share some of that, but thanks especially for tonight.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next week, next Thursday, 6:30.
Mary, feel free to share our email address if anybody wants to contact us, and then, we answer some of the other questions. And
Okay.
we don't have a lot of available time, but we will happily chip in and pitch in and help whenever we can.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. I'll include that in the survey as well as the PDF again to make sure everybody gets it. Thanks, everyone. This has just been a great program. Appreciate your time.
Hey, good night.
Good night.